Ladies and gentlemen, Lindsey Graham is no longer with us. We're going to talk about that tonight on the report from Tiger Mountain. We're in 4K. Yeah, stick around and listen. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about Lindsey Graham has passed away. Sadly, the world is in mourning. You know, the whole world is wearing a black, the flags are at half-mast, ladies and gentlemen, because Lindsey Graham, the famous neocon Republican warhawk and best friend of Israel, is no longer with us. Now, we're going to investigate that. First of all, coming here in 4K, we're down in Tim Wilms' studio, so we thought we'd go for a bit of high production value. So after about 5 years of doing this, so it's about time, I think. So what happened, ladies and gentlemen? So is Lindsey Graham in hell? Well, that's a metaphysical question, we'll say, for a later part of the show. But what happened recently, because about a week ago he was alive. So, Zelensky was he represented, I'm not sure what state he represented, but, he was really representing the state of Israel, ladies and gentlemen. He was a big fan of Israel. And he was also a big fan of Zelensky, who is the Jewish fellow who's decided to try and start World War III over in Ukraine. He's busy basically killing all the Ukrainians he can in a pointless war, trying to defeat Russia, which is impossible. He could never defeat Russia. Hitler couldn't defeat Russia. Napoleon couldn't defeat Russia. I don't think anyone's ever defeated Russia militarily. So I don't know what they think they're doing. But obviously they want to kill every young Ukrainian, which they've almost done. And so now they want to escalate the war, ladies and gentlemen. And Mr. Lindsey Graham was right behind him all the way. He was as war hawks go, he was, a star-studded variety, ladies and gentlemen. He wanted to, I think, level Gaza, which is pretty much what happened. I think he was in favour of probably dropping a nuke on Iran. And, he was in favour of giving every kind of weapon to Russia. He gloated in video recently, saying that, America is just killing all the right people. And he, kind of celebrated, killing Russians. I think Russia declared him a terrorist after that particular video. There is rumours that maybe Russia got to him on his trip to Ukraine. Obviously, Russia must have agents inside the Ukrainian government and must have a few people here and there. All it probably takes is one handshake with some kind of glove and some poison on it, and you've got trouble for Lindsey Graham. But anyway, whatever happened, he went over to Ukraine to inspect a drone factory, and apparently the official story is he came home. And then he had a heart attack and dropped dead. And then the ambulance was not quick enough to get there to save him. So he's no longer with us. And, of course, there's a very funny meme online that we might use as a picture for the show of Mitch McConnell, who's also sick in hospital, apparently. Apparently he's still alive, which I don't personally believe. I think he's probably dead as well. And it is kind of unusual that both Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham are both kind of dead within the same week. Obviously I've been listening to different opinions about what people think about this, and a lot of people are celebrating on the left and the right about Lindsey Graham passing away. Some people of a kind of queue, who still believe a kind of queue that there are white hats out there, believe maybe the white hats that are connected to Trump or whatever, bumped off these two people, even though they were both technically Trump allies in some way. Though both have had problems with Trump in the past. So, look, it's very hard to understand what's going on there. Some people think it's Russia. Russia did it. Some people think Iran did it, of course. Some people think Bibi did it. Maybe, he wasn't cucking hard enough for Israel, or they were sick of him, or maybe he knew something they didn't want to know. I mean, there's an awful rumour about ladybugs. I don't think I want to sully the show with that, but if you want to find out this awful detail about Lindsey Graham, just Google Lindsey Graham and ladybugs, ladies and gentlemen, and you will not thank me for that suggestion. He was seen at 70 years old at Disney World, walking around with like some kind of child's toy. The guy was very dodgy, let's just say that, ladies and gentlemen, let's just say that. And, of course, there are some elements of the right, I guess, who are very sad about the passing of Lindsey Graham, and that was obviously the Zionists. He was extremely much a pro-Zionist, Lindsey Graham. So apparently Avi Yemeni held a candlelit vigil and was seen crying in the street. He was, apparently, which is probably a joke, that part. But we did hold a vigil, and I don't know. I guess if you were a right-wing pro-Israel person, you probably might have liked Lindsey Graham. Is he in hell? Well, I think if there is a hell, it's probably reserved for someone like that, someone who is a kind of fairly heartless warmonger, and death came on him quick. And there was an interesting video recently where Tucker Carlson was talking about, all these people that are involved in all these wars. They're not going to get away with it, ladies and gentlemen, because in the end, we all have to stand before our Maker, God, or even just the Grim Reaper. So in the end, no one really gets away with anything in a sense. So from that perspective, I don't think Lindsey Graham has gotten away with it. Whether he's in hell, there are people who believe that there is no hell, and that even evil dictators are up there in heaven. So who knows, ladies and gentlemen? It's not for us to judge. That's up for God to judge, or whatever powers there be in the other worlds. So there we go. That's my little report on the death of Lindsey Graham. Obviously, 2026 is speeding up. Mitch McConnell is still sick in hospital, and maybe he'll pass away, or maybe they'll just do all these AI videos of him jumping around playing basketball. I don't know, but that's the report from Tiger Mountain for this week.